True romance is rarely found in grand declarations, diamond rings, or soft rain falling on a passionate embrace. No, true, enduring romance is often forged in the fires of supreme pettiness. It is written in the rigid lines of a matriarch's jaw, measured in ounces of premium palm oil, and sealed on the worn cushions of a living room sofa. If you want to understand the architecture of a love that spans decades, you have to look past the poetry and examine the sheer, unadulterated grit of a stubborn woman holding her ground. I learned this entirely by observing my grandparents. Long before we moved to the gray, drizzly streets of the United Kingdom, my brother and I lived under the sweltering, golden sun of Lagos, Nigeria, in a house governed by the iron will of Mama Beatrice and the charming, chaotic evasion of Papa Elias. They had raised a small army of children together, 7 in total, with my mother landing right in the middle, and their marriage was a well-oiled machine. Except, of course, when Papa Elias forgot to oil it. Or, in this particular instance, fuel it. It was a Sunday. In Nigeria, Sundays possess a specific texture. The air is thick with the lingering scent of starch pressed into cotton fabrics, the rhythmic thumping of distant church drums, and the heavy, humid heat that wraps around your skin like a wet blanket. We had just endured a blistering 3-hour service. My brother and I were wedged into the back seat of Papa Elias' ancient, olive-green Peugeot 504, our legs sticking to the cracked vinyl upholstery. Up front, Mama Beatrice sat with the rigid posture of royalty, her elaborate Gilhetti miraculously untouched by the oppressive humidity. Papa Elias was at the wheel, humming a cheerful, off-key highlife tune, eager to get home to his Sunday afternoon nap and a heavy meal. The Peugeot rumbled along the uneven asphalt, dipping into potholes with heavy, metallic groans. Then the humming stopped, not Papa Elias humming the cars. The engine gave a violent shudder, a mechanical cough that sounded distinctly like an old man clearing his throat, followed by a pathetic, wheezing sputter. The car lurched forward once, twice, and then glided to a heavy, dead halt right by the side of the bustling road. The silence inside the cabin was immediate and terrifying. Outside, hawkers shouted, and motorcycles buzzed past like angry hornets, but inside the Peugeot, the air turned to ice despite the 90-degree weather. My brother and I shrank back into the vinyl, trying to make ourselves invisible. Mama Beatrice did not turn her head. She slowly reached into her leather handbag, pulled out a small velvet cloth, and began to meticulously wipe her reading glasses. "Elias," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it possessed the acoustic force of a thunderclap. "Why has this vehicle stopped moving?" Papa Elias nervously wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, his jovial demeanor evaporating. "Ah, Beatrice, you know these old cars. It is just a minor mechanical hiccup. The carburetor is probably flooded. Give me a minute to check under the hood." "The carburetor is not flooded," she replied, holding her glasses up to the harsh sunlight to inspect for smudges. "Because for a carburetor to flood, there must be liquid, and unless this car has suddenly learned to drink the air, there is no liquid in it." "Is there, Elias?" The truth hung in the stifling air. Exactly 14 days prior, I had been sitting at the kitchen table when Mama Beatrice slid a thick stack of crisp Naira notes across the tablecloth. She had looked Papa Elias dead in the eye and instructed him to fill the tank. He had nodded, pocketed the cash with a confident smile, and walked out the door. Later that evening, he had returned smelling strongly of roasted goat meat and cold Star Lager, having spent a glorious afternoon holding court with his friends at the local tavern. The fuel tank had remained dangerously near empty ever since, a ticking time bomb of marital consequence. "Beatrice, my love, let me just flag down a taxi to get a jerry can." "You will not flag down a taxi," she interrupted, slipping her glasses back onto her face. She adjusted her posture, settling deeper into the passenger seat. "There is a filling station just down the road, 5 minutes on foot. You will get out. You will put your hands on the trunk of this vehicle. And you will push us there." Papa Elias stared at her in utter disbelief. He was wearing his finest Sunday agbada, a sprawling, heavily embroidered robe of pristine white lace that draped over his shoulders like a king's mantle. Pushing a 2-ton block of French steel down a busy Lagos road in the midday sun was not just physical labor, it was a public execution of his dignity. "Beatrice, please, the children are in the back. People are looking." "Let them look," she said, pulling a small battery-operated fan from her bag and switching it on. "It is good for the community to see a man taking responsibility for his transport." "Go." Knowing there was no court of appeal, Papa Elias let out a heavy sigh, opened his door, and stepped out into the blazing heat. He gathered the flowing sleeves of his immaculate lace agbada, tying them awkwardly around his waist to prevent them from dragging in the dirt. He walked to the rear of the Peugeot, planted his polished leather shoes against the dusty asphalt, and leaned his weight against the trunk. With a strained grunt, the car slowly began to roll. Inside, Mama Beatrice sat in absolute serenity, the tiny blades of her portable fan whirring softly against the hum of the city. My brother and I peeked out the back window. Papa Elias' face was contorted in effort, his jaw clenched, veins popping on his forehead. Every time the tires hit a dip in the road, he had to heave with all his might to keep the momentum going. Neighborhood aunties walking home from church paused to point and whisper. Taxis honked as they swerved around him. Through it all, he pushed. By the time the sprawling canopy of the filling station came into view, the pristine white lace of his agbada was clinging to his back, entirely soaked through with sweat. He stumbled toward the fuel pump, panting heavily, leaning against the metal pillar to keep his legs from giving out. The attendant, a young man with a rag thrown over his shoulder, approached with a barely concealed smirk. "Full tank, sir?" the attendant asked. Papa Elias could only nod, waving a trembling hand toward the nozzle. When the pumping was done, he reached into his trousers and pulled out his own wallet, painfully peeling away the damp bills from his personal stash to cover the cost. Mama Beatrice had already paid for this petrol 2 weeks ago. She was certainly not going to pay for it twice. The drive the rest of the way home was silent, save for the blessed, steady hum of a fully fueled engine. When we finally pulled into the driveway of their compound, Papa Elias practically fell out of the car. He dragged himself through the front door, stripping off the ruined layers of his Sunday best, and collapsed into his favorite armchair in the living room. His eyes were closed, his breathing heavy, but a faint smile touched his lips. In his mind, the punishment was over. He had paid his penance in sweat and humiliation. Now surely he would be rewarded with a massive, restorative Sunday lunch. "Beatrice," he called out weakly toward the kitchen, "I am perished, please bring me my food." A few moments later, Mama Beatrice emerged from the kitchen. She was carrying a tray. She walked over to his armchair and set it down on the low wooden table before him. Papa Elias opened his eyes and stared. Sitting in the center of the tray was a plastic bowl. Inside the bowl was a handful of dry, unsweetened cornflakes. There was no milk, there was no sugar, just the dusty, beige flakes resting at the bottom of the plastic. "What is this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You said you were perished. Eat cereal," she replied smoothly, not missing a beat. "I am far too tired from sitting in a stationary car to cook lunch." As she said this, she turned to my brother and me. From the deep pockets of her wrapper, she produced a cylindrical package wrapped in shiny foil. It was a brand new pack of imported McVitie's chocolate digestive biscuits, a rare and coveted luxury in our household. She cracked the seal, handed us each 3 thick chocolate-coated discs, and gave us a warm, affectionate smile. We sat on the rug, biting into the rich, crumbly chocolate, while Papa Elias sat across from us, slowly picking up a single, dry cornflake and chewing it with the profound sorrow of a defeated man. But the day was not over, and Mama Beatrice's artistry in the medium of petty vengeance had not yet reached its masterpiece. As the afternoon stretched into evening, a rich, intoxicating aroma began to waft from the kitchen. Mama Beatrice was making dinner, and she was not cutting corners. The scent of roasted locust beans, mingled with the heavy, earthy fragrance of heated palm oil and dried crayfish. She was preparing jibajiri, a velvety, savory soup made from blended brown beans, cooked down until it was rich and buttery, accompanied by a colossal mound of semolina, stirred over a hot stove until it achieved the perfect, stretchy consistency. Papa Elias perked up. The smell alone was enough to resurrect him from his afternoon misery. He marched to the dining table, taking his seat at the head, his earlier grievances washed away by the promise of a feast. He believed the natural order of the universe was finally restoring itself. Mama Beatrice emerged from the kitchen carrying his plate. When she set it down in front of him, my brother and I gasped. It was a mountain. She had piled the thick, heavy semolina so high it looked like a small geological formation. The jibajiri was ladled generously around the base, pooling with chunks of tender, assorted meats. It was enough food to feed 3 grown men. She had cooked an excessive, absurd amount purely to make a point. Papa Elias stared at the towering structure of dough. "Beatrice," he chuckled nervously, "this is a feast for a village." "The food is too much. I will not be able to finish all of this." "Is that so?" she asked softly. "Yes, my love, my stomach is not a warehouse. I cannot eat this." Mama Beatrice did not argue, she did not sigh. She simply turned around, walked calmly back into the kitchen, and returned with an empty ceramic plate and a large wooden spoon. She stood over him, raised the spoon, and drove it straight down the center of the semolina mountain, cleaving it perfectly in two. She scooped exactly half of the dough, half of the rich soup, and half of the meat onto her empty plate. Then, without looking at him, she picked up her plate, turned on her heel, and marched straight up the stairs to her bedroom, shutting the door behind her with a definitive click. Papa Elias was left sitting at the dining table, staring at the violently bisected remains of his dinner. He ate in complete silence, chewing thoughtfully, fully digesting the gravity of his tactical errors. That night, when the house was dark and quiet, I crept out of my room to get a glass of water. As I tiptoed past the living room, I saw him. Papa Elias was stretched out on the worn floral fabric of the sofa, a thin sheet pulled over his chest. He had his own bedroom. He had a large, comfortable mattress upstairs, but he was on the couch. He was used to it, honestly. Whenever he tested the boundaries of Mama Beatrice's patience, he always ended up on that damn couch. It was his personal purgatory, the place where he went to reflect on his sins until her storm passed. And pass it always did. The next morning, she would make him hot tea, he would crack a joke that made her roll her eyes, and the world would spin on its axis once again. But he never, ever forgot the lesson of the dry cereal and the bisected semolina. From that Sunday onward, for the rest of his driving life, Papa Elias never allowed the needle on the fuel gauge to dip below the halfway mark. Mama Beatrice passed away last year. The house feels impossibly quiet without her sharp wit and commanding presence. May her unyielding, brilliant soul rest in perfect peace. When I look back at their life together, I realize that her strictness was never about anger. It was about demanding the best from a man she loved enough to hold accountable. True love isn't always gentle. Sometimes, true love is making your partner push a Peugeot in the afternoon sun so they never forget the value of a promise. If this story made you smile or reminded you of the stubborn, beautiful love in your own family, hit that subscribe button right now. We share stories that dive deep into the messy, hilarious, and genuine realities of human connection every single week. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is the most pettily brilliant thing a partner or family member has ever done to teach a lesson? Let's keep the memories alive in the comments.